And we're back. You're listening to Live from the Heartland. This is WLUW 88.7 Community Radio on the Loyola University campus. But we're live, as I just said, at the Heartland Cafe at the corner of Glenwood and Lunt in Rogers Park. My next guest is Dave Poynter. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning.
Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, Love Canal, the China Syndrome, the movie Silkwood, these are all iconic events and media representations that raise in most of us nightmarish fears about nuclear energy. But Dave, you're here to tell us why nuclear energy is really our friend, maybe even our invisible friend. I should give you your bona fides here. You're a nuclear engineer at the Argonne National Laboratory.
That's correct.
And you work on what I've been told is the bleeding edge of that technology. Can you just tell us why all those nightmarish images are not really relevant anymore?
Well, I think.
Or are they?
I think maybe they weren't relevant to begin with.
Ooh.
That they are interesting stories to tell. So, I think in the history of the nuclear electric generation industry, at least, and you're telling me you can't hear me, right? In the history of most industrial applications around the world, over the last 50 years, there's been a huge shift in the way that safety, public health, and environmental stewardship are considered in the development of technologies. So those fears you mentioned really grew out of an era before the development of nuclear energy. Where
Chernobyl wasn't that long ago.
Let's go back. Well, let's start back to some of the first these China syndrome ideas and the fears that really come from those. Really come from an earlier period when radiation was touted as a miracle cure for every disease known to man, and you could even buy radiation devices to put in your home to treat yourself and guarantee your long life. So before the World War II era, when the real understanding of radiation was developed, there was this massive proliferation of all these ideas and technologies ideas and uses of radiation that really weren't so good. And out of those grew health effects that were very obvious to people. You saw increases in cancer rates. The fears people associate with radiation really tied to those early activities, not necessarily to nuclear energy. And then you come closer to today. You look at the difference between the TMI accident and the Chernobyl accident, and really And
when you say TMI, you're talking about 3 Mile Island.
3 Mile
okay,
Island.
Sorry.
About 3 Mile Island. In my view, the 3 Mile Island accident was really the best demonstration of the American technology we could have had, because it showed that the safety design for the system did its job, and it protected the public. No major, no release beyond the background level of radiation in the area was made from the plant. So there was no one directly harmed from that accident. Now, the fear that was created by that accident was really the most detrimental event associated with TMI.
Okay, I have to say, and I did say this to you earlier, but I'm going to repeat it. I'm from Washington State originally, where we have a big nuclear reactor called Hanford, and the waste was basically leaking from containers that were buried underground, and it has reached the groundwater, and the nuclear waste, radioactive waste, is now creeping towards the Columbia River. Now, you told me that that's not a real concern anymore.
Well,
is that a concern, or?
I actually grew up in Tennessee near the Oak Ridge Reservation, which was a comparable plant to Hanford during the Manhattan Project during World War II. And those legacy waste issues really are a major issue today, even.
Okay, so you're not dismissing that.
No,
okay.
Absolutely not, because they are major cleanup issues that need to be addressed, and are being addressed slowly, more slowly than most of us would like. But there are technologies for collecting and redirecting those wastes to more appropriate disposal sites.
Like where?
What
would the appropriate and safe disposal be?
So a good example is the low-level waste site in New Mexico called WIP, Waste Isolation Pilot Plant.
Okay.
And it's designed to be a long short-term storage facility for low-level radioactive waste, which actually the waste you mentioned from Hanford, many of those fall there into that category. The real issue with many of these legacy waste are the chemical toxicity issues, not necessarily the radiation associated with them. So that really is the focus of most of those programs. Now, we come to today, and as I mentioned, over the last 50 years, there's been a major shift in the entire industrial complex, so that safety has become the top priority within the organization and to protect its own workers. And then public health and environmental stewardship have fallen along behind that. So there's a different culture in the industries of today than there was during the Manhattan Project, when you were driven by this need to very rapidly develop a technology at any cost to win a war.
Now, one of the things I think that puts this into perspective and is that in Illinois, what percentage of the power in Illinois is safely generated by nuclear power?
Oh, that's really an important point. In Illinois, we are lucky to have the largest number of nuclear power plants in the United States in any state. We have 12. And on a typical day, they produce something like 50 to 60% of the power, electric power used in Illinois. If we live in Chicago, in northern Illinois, where the reactors are concentrated, then on a nice spring day when we all have our windows open and aren't running our heat and air, it actually can produce more than 90% of the electricity used by Chicago.
So we are already, sort of, it's our silent friend.
It really is our silent friend, and we do get a lot of benefits from using that particular type of energy source rather than relying on coal like much of the country. In spite of our enormous transportation system and all the particulate emissions associated with all those cars on the road, our air quality is much better than similar cities the size of Chicago around the world as a consequence.
Because we're not relying as much on coal power?
Because we're not relying as much on coal.